Welcome to the Food Junkies Podcast. Here, we aim to bring you the experience, strength, and hope of professionals working on the front lines in the field of food addiction. Our mission is to educate you, the listener, and increase overall awareness about food addiction as a recognized disorder. Here, we discuss all things recovery, exploring the many pathways people take towards abstinence in order to achieve a health-forward lifestyle. We hope to inspire you to thrive rather than just survive. So stay positive, make a change for yourself, and share your journey with others. And hopefully the message will spread.
Want to hear our stories? Vera Tarman and Bitten Jonsson tell all. Welcome to the Food Junkies Podcast. My name is Dr. Vera Tarman, and I am your host for today, interviewing myself and Bitten Jonsson about our history with food addiction and recovery, a walk down memory lane of food addiction. Bitten Jonsson is a Swedish pioneer in food addiction treatment with nearly 40 years of experience in addiction medicine. She is a registered nurse, addiction specialist, creator and trainer for the Holistic Medicine Program and the Sugar Diagnostic Tool, which assesses pathological use of sugar, flour, and processed foods. She is also the author of Sugar Bomb in Your Brain and Sugar Bomb in Your Brain Cookbook, as well as the creator of the Facebook group Sugar Bomb in Your Brain. Myself, I have been food addicted since my 20s. I identified as a food addict for the last 17 years. I have been working in addiction medicine for 20 years. My book, Food Junkies, is soon to enter its third edition. I have a Facebook group called I'm Sweet Enough, Sugar-Free for Life, and you can find me at YouTube on Vera Tarman, MD. Okay, so Bitten, let's get started with some questions. And I'm going to ask you first, and then we'll go back and forth. When did you first notice your relationship with food was different than others?
Well, actually, when I look back, it was quite late when I thought it was crazy. But, I can see that I was in love with sugar from 5-6 years old, but I never noticed that or thought about it. In 1992, I had been sober from alcohol for 7 years. I was in recovery and, learning about recovery and all that. So I thought, I don't want to smoke anymore. I thought, that's a drug, so I got to quit smoking. And I did that on my anniversary date in September 1992. And also, it was because I was listening to Terry Gorski about if you keep other psychoactive substances, sooner or later you can, relapse into your, mother drug, or I don't remember the word you used, but it scared me so much. And of course, I didn't want that. So I decided, okay, I'm going to quit smoking. And that's when the obsession started. Every evening I thought I was so good. I haven't been smoking during the day. So I rewarded myself with chocolate and ice cream. And, looking back, I could see that the portion was bigger and bigger and bigger. And another thing I noticed was that if somebody came visiting me, I have made this huge bowl with all kinds of chocolate, ice cream, syrup, nuts, gooey. And somebody rang the door. I got very angry. How dare you disturb me when I'm going to have my, evening? And this bothered me, but I didn't think about it as a food addiction. I thought it was some kind of a compensation for not smoking. But that's the first time I really noticed that, this is sick. And deep inside, I thought, God, I'm doing exactly the same with this as I did with the drinking. I'm hiding, lying, and sneaking. That disturbed me a lot. So that was really the first time it hit me that it was sick.
Okay. So, but before that, you recognized that you liked sugar. Did you recognize that you used it for comfort or for coping? Or was it that day, that first realization that you were using it like a drug, that you also made that connection?
Yeah, that's when I did the first connection, 92. Before that, I grew up, in a family where it was home-cooked food. And, we were poor workers, so we never bought candy or stuff like that. We could get a small glass of punch and a cinnamon roll, but it was, limited. It wasn't like we got a bowl of cinnamon rolls or cookies. And it was holidays, and it was sort of a celebration. it wasn't, emotional eating or anything in that way that I can think of looking back. It was like, woo, birthday, woo, Christmas. And of course, I loved it. And I had an aunt, and she was very overweight when I look back at it. And she worked in a coffee shop, and there were all kinds of stuff in that coffee shop. And I loved going there. But, I could rarely buy something. But she, of course, I understand she was a sugar addict looking back, but I didn't understand that she dropped things by accident, cakes. And so she came visiting. And I remember drooling almost when I heard their car, because we lived 15 minutes outside town. And that I can remember how excited I was when I heard their car, because I knew she had bags with, broken chocolates, broken cookies and cakes and bakery and you name it. And my mom was furious because she took it and she was, saying, you can have that after dinner, you can have it. And we were angry because we kids wanted it right away.
Yeah.
I remember that. And I also remember stealing sugar cubes when I was 5, 6 years old in grandma's cabinet. And I remember I wasn't allowed to eat those small sugar cubes they had for coffee. But I remember, in order not to be heard, I snuck in and I put them on the side. And I took the white powder from them in the bottom, licked that, and then I put the sugar cubes back. So it was, I loved sugar.
Yeah.
It made me happy. Yeah.
Yeah, sugar made you happy. That's the term. So I'll say with my own experience, I think that like you, because we grew up in a similar time where sugar wasn't as abundant as it is today. Like it was designated as special. So you had to have reasons to have it between special occasions, not like today. And I think that because of that, I also didn't recognize that I had a problem. I just knew I liked sugar a lot. But, so Christmas was an extraordinary time. And I have to say that to this day, I still get excited about Christmas. And then I have a real letdown because I'm not going to have all those things. Yet it's still built in that, oh my God, Christmas, all those exciting. No, they're not. And then I have this letdown. So I find Christmas a very troubled time for me still to this day. And, Halloween, the same thing. But it wasn't really until my university years when I wanted to quit drinking, because I have a family history of alcoholism. And I think that when I started drinking in my late teens, I saw that my drinking was behaving like I was behaving like my mother, basically. And so I knew in my 20s I had to stop because I wanted to go to school. I had lots of ambitions for myself. And then the craziness about sugar, it was like being hit over the head. It was a surprise. I always knew I liked sugar, but the obsession, complete obsession, that just shocked me. So that's really when that happened. And relying on it as an emotional thing didn't happen until later, because eventually I learned to tame the addiction monster by grazing throughout the day and by, compensating by throwing up, like basically adopting bulimic behavior. And then gradually I learned to live with this. Like it took a long time. We as human beings can adapt to being miserable without even,
you bet.
It's just part of life.
Yep.
And so for, say, 10 years or so, I just adapted to this thing that was inside of me that was getting worse and worse and worse. And as I was getting fatter and fatter and fatter and feeling tireder and tireder, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, that's what happened there. Okay, so that leads to the next question, which is how did your food addiction progress from when you noticed, as you said, you had this epiphany of I'm treating this like a drug, but did you stop at that point? I imagine you didn't. So what happened?
Well, I tried to limit it because I didn't want to be fat. I wasn't really overweight. I had some overweight, but I didn't. So, I knew that if I kept eating the way I did with all the ice cream and the chocolate and, the syrup, I could have a whole bottle of walnut syrup on a huge bowl of this. So, it was, you can imagine the insulin load at that time, scary. But, then I tried to limit it. So I promised myself in the morning, I will not do it tonight. And then I had some risky things like, it is 5 minutes before the little store closes. It takes me at least 7 minutes to get there in the car. It's, snowstorm. But I threw myself in the car and drove recklessly down because I was white knuckling it until 7 minutes before the store. And then, no, only for tonight, only for tonight. I'm going to start all over tomorrow. So that's when I realized this is absolutely nuts. And then when I quit drinking, I still had the nicotine, And so I actually lost weight after I quit drinking 1985. And I exercised a lot. So I think that kept it down. But, of course, if I could choose, and also I look back and think, being a nurse, I knew nothing about nutrition. I didn't think it was screwy. I love bacon, right? Salty bacon. So, one day I felt for bacon, so I could eat bacon all day. And the next I could eat ice cream all day. And I thought that was very normal. That's what you like. And so you can eat like that. It didn't dawn on me that was very sick. So the struggle was very much in that way. And that's also what I thought, if I keep smoking like this, I can never become really healthy. And also I started to study with Terence Gorski. And he taught me a tremendous amount about amino acids, eating 3 meals a day. And I thought that was nuts. But, I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. So it's hard to remember exactly how I did. But I was, it was like a big process in my head that something is not right. And then I guess it was when I was working as a program director at the treatment facility down in Uppsala. The teachers were, they came from Parkside Medical Corporation in Lutheran General Hospital in Chicago, which was a big hospital. I don't even know if it exists today. But I had 2 of them that I worked with. They were teaching us how to run a treatment facility. So one day I said to one of them, to Jean, I said, I don't understand. How come I can quit alcohol and smoking, but I can't quit sugar and ice cream? And she looked at me and said, maybe you're a food addict. And I fell backwards. I never heard that terminology ever in my life. So that was the first step into knowing that this could be something sick, but I didn't understand how and what. And then, I showed you this one time. This was the first book she gave me by Joan Ebbett. It's written 1989. And so I started reading this, but it says eating disorder recovery. That's a terminology they used at that time. And I read a few pages and I threw it in the wastebasket because I hated it, because it was disgusting. And I went and picked it up and I read it again. So that was my struggle with getting to terms with this. But, a funny thing I thought about a couple of weeks ago, I always struggle with the word food addiction because I'm not addicted to food. I'm not addicted to animal protein, to meat, fish, egg, butter, ghee, or some veggies above ground. I have no problem with that. Never really had problems with that. So if she had said sugar addiction, I think I catched it faster. Because when I ask clients too, do you have a problem with food? And they say, no, not really food, but sugar, yes. Or do you have problems with sugar? Well, I could overeat anything. You've heard all this hundreds of times, I'm sure. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. I started to, as a joke, call alcoholism liquid addiction.
Right.
Just to point out, about the psychoactive substance. But so it did progress. And when I look back today, it's really, you can see stage 1, stage 2. Stage 1, I just acted out openly because I didn't think I did something wrong. With, restricting and trying to diet and, I'm not, I can eat on Saturdays and all those kind of weird things that doesn't work. But then here I probably went into stage 2. I started hiding more, lying more, didn't want to show how I was eating or trying to be very proper when I was with people. So, and then reading this book, sort of blew it for me.
Did you have to deal with weight loss at some point in your life? Like, did it progress to the point where you gained weight and then you got in that whole diet industry and all the ways of trying to lose weight?
Of course, as any nursing school, we were all obsessed with dieting. Even if I look back, and I can't see that we were overweight, but it was like a fad among us that we restricted through the weeks. Still, if I starve, I probably have to do it. But, cottage cheese and fruit for lunch. I can't think of anything more disgusting to eat. It's not going to satisfy me. It was cold. That's what we ate in nursing school. But then, of course, we binged in the evening. Pizza, hot dogs, chocolate, ice cream, candy. And then we said, well, we try tomorrow again.
Yeah.
So we did that week after week. So we always dieted. That was something you had to do. But, looking back, I was never really overweight until during those years I went 5 up, 7 down, 7 up, 8 up, 7 down. So I used to joke and say when I lecture that if I would add everything I went up and down, it would be a tremendous amount of weight. But the only time I really lost weight and kept it was when I started on the keto diet, 2016. So that's many years later. Before that, I could gain and lose, even though I didn't mess around with food so much. So, yeah.
Okay.
So what about you?
Yeah. So when I realized that I had a problem, I actually didn't realize I had a problem. I realized that I was gaining weight. And this thing that I was talking about that lived within me, I didn't actually question that. It just seemed like that's who Vera is. I didn't even identify it as a problem. It was like some people are aggressive. I'm just a pig with food. Like it was just a feature about myself that I kept quiet. I wasn't proud about it, but I didn't see it as an illness. It was just, I guess, what we say, a moral failing. But what I did see as a problem, so I just accepted that about myself. I get angry sometimes. I eat too much a lot of the time. So I realized that I was gaining too much weight. That really bothered me. So a lot of my attempts over those 10 or 15 years, it was like wandering in the wilderness, was trying to control my weight. And I didn't try to really change my eating because I didn't think I could, other than, like you said, I'll just eat at night, or I'll just eat on Saturdays, or I'll have cheat days and that sort of thing. I did check out places that were popular at that time, sort of commercial diet programs, but I didn't have the money to join them. And I didn't really think they would work anyway, because I just thought this was who I am. And I just have to learn to manage it. It was all about how to manage, and mainly how to manage my weight, which I used through basically through bulimic behavior, and until it got to be exhausting. And I did have several, I'm just going to really, really restrict diets. And when I restricted sugar, I mean, sometimes I would have a diet where all I would eat is sugar. Like, why would I eat the broccoli? If I'm not only going to have so many calories, it will be the good ones like sugar. Of course, that didn't work at all, because I would be so hungry after the sugar crash. It was very painful and made me really dislike diets. Often when I tell people now, I know they're operating from the thought of what a diet feels like, because you're hungry like in a painful way hungry.
Yeah, miserable. Yeah.
But when I took out the sugar, I noticed, oh my God, I feel better. And I thought gradually, I mean, I did this stop and start for many years. So there was a time when I think I had stopped for a number of months. And my partner had some sugar in the house, and because I was trying to avoid it. And it was in bed when you're very vulnerable, you're very you're just relaxing with your book, about to go to sleep. And I, of course, felt like, oh, I'll have some. And that just started it off again. And I just remember realizing there's something about this sugar, but I kept telling myself, I know that there's people that will identify with this, that this can't be right. It can't be right. I have to, that's just crazy. I have to learn how to manage this. And even though I had the answer in my face, I couldn't believe it. It just seemed too stupid. And so I spent many years back and forth. And it wasn't really like my aha moment wasn't really until I read the article by Nora Volkov in the Journal of Addiction Medicine. They had a whole series, one article with a series of, one journal with a series of articles that talked about addictive nature of sugar, that I thought, oh my God, this is a thing. I've been telling myself it isn't a thing, but it is a thing. And I was an addictions doctor by then, seeing it in my face. But anyway, once I saw that, it's like once you put those glasses on, you can't unsee it anymore. And that started my moment, my aha moment. Thank God. Okay, so Bitten, can you give me, by way of illustration of some of the ways that we approached food addiction in the wrong way over the years, can you give me some examples? Like there you were, you suddenly realized this is an addiction. So where were you in your career at that point? What were other people saying about this same phenomena? And how did you break into it with your idea? Because you were a pioneer in your world at that time. I mean,
Well,
that Phil
yeah.
was, but
And when I came home from that, I did a week training then with Joan, where I got to meet Joan Ebbett and Patricia Devlin, her dietitian, those people that.
Oh, you actually met them?
Yeah. I met her because I worked with Pauline Sock and Jean Britt. They were principals at the School for Addiction Medicine for Parkside Medical Corporation in Chicago. And at that time, too, I heard about Terry Gorski. So I started to, things fell in place somehow. And deep inside, I knew that my acting around food was exactly like with alcohol. I mean,
what year was this? What year was this?
This is 92.
Okay, all right.
So I couldn't lie anymore, but I lied. I was still dieting and Weight Watchers once. I gained weight. Everybody lost weight. I gained weight. It was crazy. But I tried and restricting and binging at night and weekends. And I always, messed around with that. But then in 92, when I came home from Chicago from that week with them, but the food plan we had at that time, I look back on that and it was horrible. It kept me in cravings like you wouldn't believe. It was very low fat. It was lots of fruit. And I've never liked fruit. Never, ever. Who would eat an apple if you can eat chocolate? Apples are sour. But that was the thing we should eat because it was healthy, right? Well, banana was okay, but any other fruit was, no, I never liked veggies. I was never a veggie person, but that's what you had to eat. So I ate huge amounts of veggies and fruit and low fat and little protein. And we had the starchy stuff like, we have a Finnish rye bread here without sugar, added sugar. So we ate that and brown rice. So, and I look back and see it was starch, lots of starch and very little of other stuff. And I struggled tremendously on that food plan. And then weigh and measure, which I felt horrible control by because I'm a rebellion. So I felt like, that was even worse. And then, calling a food sponsor before and after meal 3 times a day, which I thought was, when are you going to work? I thought my whole life is, but I felt that all this kept the obsession and the control going tremendously instead of peace of mind with the eating, if I look back at it. So that was my first food plan. But anyway, I felt so much better when I came home from the US. And, I had more energy and I knew there was a problem. I had to grapple the problem, but I didn't have all the tools yet. But anyway, I worked with alcohol and drug addicts. I worked in a treatment facility. I worked with daycare, evening care. I went to meetings, So people started saying to me, "You look so perky. What's you done?" And I said, happily, I'm a food addict. And they looked at me like I came from outer space. And some snorted and thought I was absolutely crazy. And one nurse said to me, "Oh, so that's a modern in thing to say in US nowadays?" They had no idea what I talked about, that you could have any problem with food. And some people started crying and they called me and they said, "Could you help me? I'm a foodaholic." And I thought, that's an interesting word. And they called me and said to me, "My doctor is very condescending to me, tell me to eat less and move more." And now I understood so much about addiction, and I could relate that this is not willpower or bad behavior or bad character, or this is a serious problem. But I didn't see the whole big picture. So people started calling me. But I thought, oh my God, and I wasn't working with that. And the company I worked for, they said, well, you could start teaching. So there was a book, I don't know if you know about it. It's called The Anatomy of a Food Addict by Anne Catherine. You know that one?
Yeah.
Oh, good. That was the first English book I read. That was the one that also made me understand that this is a brain problem. It's not, a character problem. So I got that translated by a very obscure publisher in Sweden. I don't know how I did it. So I had that, and I started, when I lecture about the treatment center I worked in, I always said some about this. And people kept coming, and people kept coming. So I started, in hiding. I mean, I wasn't allowed to, but I started to run a little support group because there was nothing here where I live, where we only shared knowledge and we shared how we acted around food. And I remember I had a beekeeper. He told me how he spooned honey all day long from his beekeeping, and some very interesting stories. So that's how it started. And then the 11th of October, 1995, I decided to do an 8-hour treatment based on exactly what we did for alcohol and drug addicts. So that was my model. And my treatment in US, the treatment center, those were my models. For 1 day a week, 20 weeks, I made a program. So that's 11th of October, 1995. You could say that's when I started to officially help others. I've done it, under the table for a couple of years, just sharing my experience. And we knew nothing about metabolic dysfunction. We knew very little about, any other, things in the brain, reptilian brain. And we didn't have a lot of knowledge. But all these stories, we shared stories. And we could at least, realize that this is a very serious problem. And we could take away the blame and the shame. I think that was the first step into understanding that this is big. And also, looking around me, I could see that, there's a lot of alcoholics and drug addicts out there. Of course, I saw them because I worked with them. But, when it came to food and eating, I started seeing that, multiple all over the place.
Yeah.
So I understood that this is huge, but, I still didn't have a whole picture, but I got more pieces.
Yeah.
So you could say it's, that's when it started more officially, 95.
Okay.
And I have one of my clients call me every day, every 11th of October. She calls me and we talk recovery. That's a gift. That's a blessing.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, those were some of the things that happened during these years.
Okay. Well, I'll jump in. So my experience when I read this article was that I had already had, I guess, another aha moment, not that long before, where I was sitting on the couch eating something and thinking, I know this isn't an addiction because I was now an addictions doctor for a few years. And I thought, I know this is not an addiction, but what if I treat it like it is? Because I'd had these periods of time when I quit sugar and it seemed to relieve the anguish. So I'm just going to pretend that it is an addiction. And when I did that, until I talked myself out of it, or my friends tried to talk me out of it, then it always worked. So I was primed for this article. And then when I got the article, it just wasn't like night and day. I thought, okay, I didn't trust my own experience, but I could trust Nora Volkov, and because she was using real research, like rat research. It wasn't just another opinion, although I respected her opinion greatly. And she was coming from an addiction model, and it just, she tied it all together so that it was very convincing. And so then I thought, okay, I'm going to start speaking about this. And I'm going to speak about it, not because I want to change the world, but because if nothing else, it'll stop people from trying to talk me out of it. Because every time I'd say, oh, I think this is addiction, they would, like you said, snort, or they would roll their eyes or something. And I thought, well, when they roll their eyes, I've got this article that I'm going to show them. And I got on a sort of podium to say, if nothing else, to change the people around me to stop. Because eventually, I mean, we're social creatures and we're influenced. I would eventually feel guilty, and then I go, "Oh yeah, you're right," and then I'd give in. And I didn't want to do that anymore. So it was in a way to build protection for myself. But like you, I had many people come to me and say, there's something about this that's right. Like, what is it about this that's right? And somebody, so I started speaking more publicly. And somebody said to me, Vera, you have to write a book because nobody will listen to you unless you have a book in your hand. And I thought, writing a book is not easy. It's, I'm an English major first. I know it's not easy. It's a task. I don't want to. I want to be on this mission to. Anyway, they convinced me that it was really important, and it really was important because that gave me the opportunity to speak on the radio about my book because it's a new book about this. And what I was floored by was everybody at the beginning of the interview would say, almost in a joke, "Oh, so food's addictive, eh?" And by the end of the interview, because they had to listen to me, because they had to ask good questions, they would say, "Oh my God, you know what? I think I might be a food addict, or I think my wife."
I know.
And so once we had the opportunity to speak and they had to listen, it was like a done deal. And that sort of just encouraged me further. And luckily, because of that book, somebody was listening on the radio. She said that she pulled over to the side of the road because she wanted to call it. It was a call-in show, and she wanted to call in to ask me a question, which I answered. And then she emailed me later and said, "I've got some money that I would like to donate to your cause. What would you like to do with it?" And I said, "Oh my God, this is a God moment here, or a God gift, or I don't know what." I said, "We need a treatment center. Like, what kind of money are you talking about?" And she said that she would donate for 3 years. I worked at a treatment center, a food addiction program, which started in, I think it was 2017, 2018. So I'm many years behind you. And we started a food addiction program at Renaissance, where I worked for 3 years, a residential program. And that opened up even more doors of people curious about food addiction. And I then heard about all the things that they had tried that I had not done because I couldn't afford to or whatever, like Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig and bariatric surgery and all these things to try to maintain weight, which to my mind was really trying to control their food addiction, and the weight was just a consequence of it. So that's where I am today, is still in that realm. So
when was your first book? Which year?
2014.
Oh, okay. So I was 10 years ahead of you then.
Yeah, you're much further ahead of me. And I hadn't even, by then I had heard of you. Like that was the other thing, that we didn't have social media then. And
No.
For the book, that's when I found out about Phil Wardell. I found out that I wasn't the only one talking about this crazy theory. There was Phil Wardell, and then there was you in Sweden, and Joan Iflin. Who knew? Like there were people in the world that were doing it.
Yeah.
I had no idea, but gradually I do think that you certainly and Phil were the first ones, and then this book that you just showed.
Yeah, and I was at the training camp with Terry Gorski, and I met Mary Fushi.
Oh wow!
Who was together with Phil Wardell, and the thing was that she approached me not because of the food addiction problem. We didn't know about each other in that way, but because I was from Sweden. And she had relatives. And we found out it's about 15 minutes from where I live. So we about floored. And that's how I got to know them. And then Sue Rennes, and then Esther, and, and it grew. And it was pretty late I heard about you. It was when I joined Food Addiction Institute in 2008, I guess, or something, that I started work with them. That's when I started hearing about you and your book. And it was, my God, there's a lot of exciting things out there I don't know about. Yeah. That's how I felt. Yeah. So...
Yeah, and actually, we're just exploding right now, like in 2000.
Yes, I love it.
It's another explosion.
When I do the professional referrals, the text you sent me about you, and then I have, you're in the expert section in the end of the book on solution. And then, all the links to you is on an appendix with professional referrals. Here, you can, turn here. When I started, it was only me. Years. And now it's page upon page, and I love it, I think it's amazing. Yeah.
So you have somewhere in your work, you developed a treatment methodology, like you have your sugar diagnostic tool, and you have your program that your health program.
Yeah, my online training.
Yeah, how did
being a nurse, I was networking with researchers, one Swedish researcher that did Charlotte Erlandsson Albertsson. And, there were others that I connected with here and in other countries, and some psychiatrists and psychologists and what do you call people that teach people how to have daily routines and exercise? Well, you know what I mean. I connected a physical therapist, exercise person, a chef. So I started to connect with all of these. But the thing that made the most impact on me was that I got to know, because I was very curious I read something about candida, candida in the stomach. If you eat too much sugar and junk, you get, overgrowth of candida. It's not like it is a dangerous foreign germ, the fungus, but you get an imbalance in your stomach.
Yeah.
And all my clients have all kinds of stomach problems. And I wasn't trained in gastroenterology, but I started looking around and I met this guy. He's a naturopathic doctor and he's trained with Jeffrey Bland, whom I had heard of, in functional medicine. And also I was very touched that Bill, Bill and Bob in AA.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but Bill was helped by a Canadian medical doctor named Abram Hoffer. Do you know about that?
No, I don't think I do.
Look this up. You're going to love it. Anyway, Bill had, after he quit drinking and was sober, he still had a depression. Of course, we understand a lot about that today, but they didn't. But Abram Hoffer started treating Bill with B3 niacin, which is a very beautiful, it's lowering cholesterol naturally, and it has all kinds of benefits. And I stumbled upon that because I read about Bill depression, because we tested depression. So one of the the psychiatrists that I work with, he actually contacted me when he heard me on some radio program about sugar causing depression. That's what he heard. So that's how I got, like the depression screening in my screening form when I started working with people. So anyway, and then I got the connection to candida. And, today we know that a broken microbiome can cause depression, anxiety, and all kinds of mental problems. We didn't really talk about that then in the medical traditional field, but these guys did. The orthomolecular doctors did, and the functional medicine doctors did. And I was, what? Because I saw it. So I thought, well, I have to explore this. So I contacted Peter, as his name is. He's trained in US. So I contacted him and started to go that way. And that's when I started to figure, nobody talked about broken stomach. We said we didn't have the word microbiome at that time. We talked about stomach flora or intestinal flora, right? And so many of my clients had, candida in their vulva. And then we understood it's in the stomach, in their throat. Their tongue was gray. And I just looked at their tongue when I assessed them. And I said, oh, my God, because it grows from sugar. So that's the seed for me to start connect the dots. So I figured I need to have these guys with me. So I started to train in functional medicine with these guys, with Peter and another one that he trained called Leif. And then the psychiatrist Bosse, who now is the CEO of the Swedish Orthomolecular Association. And I stumbled over Bill being treated with B3 niacin. It's like, what is this? Is it our higher power throwing stuff in our way? I don't know. But it fell on me all over the place. And I started seeing, connections. And also, I don't like details. It bores me to death. So I'm a helicopter. So I skim 10 articles or 10 books. and I just pick pieces here and there and I put them together. That's my gift, superpower I have. And a lot of people told me that I'm good at that. I'm not the one that go down into details in an article or anything. I fall asleep. So that's when I started, working with these people. And it was like a whole new world opening. But the thing was, they had no idea what they treated. They wanted to help my clients with some of the health problems, with powders, with sugar in, and with all kinds of herbs with sugar and tinctures. And they knew nothing. So we clashed in the beginning. But then we started to train each other. So I started to lecture for them. And that's when I figured I want to marry functional medicine and orthomolecular medicine. And then later on, I wanted to marry metabolic people and all kinds of people. So my theme today is #connect the dots. So that's how I came. And that's how I started to teach more and more holistically, like getting Kerstin, who's a professor researcher in oxytocin, and Birgitta, who's a multiple sclerosis doctor. And I have lots of people in my faculty today and they don't know what food addiction. They are not, they understand and they respect, but they don't know how to work with it. And also in the beginning of the 90s, when I worked as a nurse at the treatment center and then a program director, we were very much into diagnosing alcohol and drug addiction because I met Börje and he knew Norman Hoffman that made SUDS in US. You know about that, right? Yeah. So we had ADDIS, alcohol and drug diagnostic instrument. So we pushed hard that we should use that to diagnose. And I did that training, Börje and I both did that training in 1990. So I started to diagnose alcohol and drug addiction. And then when I started working with sugar and flour, I saw, oh my God, it's the same symptoms in the same criteria. So that's when I made sugar.
Yeah. Okay. And what you were describing with all of these faculty that you're drawing together, that was the sort of at the beginning of your holistic medicine program.
Exactly. Because I saw that these pieces must be here. We have to address thyroid. We have to address microbiome. We have to address, and that grew and grew. And then, I started looking, and also as a nurse, in Sweden, if you're a nurse, you're holistically trained, but you're not allowed to use your holistic training. You get into one meal, one pill. One symptom, diabetes, and this is how you treat diabetes. You don't treat stuff around it.
Yeah.
I used to joke and say that the brain surgeon doesn't know where the kidneys are.
Okay, yeah. So you started from recognizing that this was an addiction and working with that, but then you're connecting the dots. How would you say your definition of food addiction has changed then, given all of this exposure? Like, I know that you prefer to use the word sugar addiction, but just in general, would you say that your understanding about the addictiveness of food has changed or refined itself?
Well, yeah, and as I said to you, I don't like saying food addiction because there is so much misconceptions about it, because certain foods are not addictive on the brain. Nobody sits and eat lard or only salt or, only, butter or something. Well, you could, but that's a sugar addiction causes that. It screws up. So, I understood the addictive brain and the reward system and neurotransmitters because I learned that from alcohol and drug researchers here in Sweden. And it's not only dopamine. It's a whole array of neurotransmitters. Dopamine affects, it's the conductor. So it's adrenaline, noradrenaline, GABA, endorphin, blah, 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 blah. I understood that it is a much more complex thing than lack of dopamine, even though it is the conductor. But and also that every neurotransmitter has to be in balance. So if you raise one, the other one lowers, or vice versa. And that creates a lot of problems. So I came along, I studied that a lot, neurotransmitter balance and imbalance. So that was that part with the brain and the reward. And then also through the years, I've been very much into what I like to define psychoactive substance. As I joked and said, you don't call alcoholism liquid addiction and then start discussing, is it vodka or whiskey or water or soda it's ethyl alcohol. We know that.
Yeah.
And the same with all other drugs. So I think it's very important that we, on one side, discuss what is the psychoactive substance that kickstarts the addiction with food. But then once that is in place, then starts, due to the insulin resistance, due to the neurotransmitter balance, due to the overactivity in the reptilian system's eating part, which gets triggered, due to the overactive pancreas, which squirts out insulin, which then lower blood sugar, and due to all the crazy fatty acid imbalance in the neurons and in the cells, you have all these broken keyholes and the key won't go in, even if you have a lot of keys, like neurotransmitter. I could, write down, this is what happened, boo, boo, boo.
Yeah.
And then when people tell me, well, I could overeat anything. Yeah, of course, I said, your system is broken, but it's caused by the sugar and the flour, the psychoactive substances.
Yeah.
It's not caused by something else. And, that's why the reason why I diagnose Vera is because I only work with addiction. I don't work with harmful users, with emotional eating or stress eating, or there's a lot of people skilled to do that. I'm not even interested in them. And also, I don't work with eating disorder if it's not an addiction underlying it, which it is in many cases.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I diagnose. That's why it's so important to me to do a thoroughly assessment of the client so that I can address things properly. Okay, it started here with the addiction, and then it had progressed to depression, restriction, binging, purging, volume addiction, and now you can overeat, sawdust.
Yeah.
And that is because the system is broken. And I draw all these things. I draw the reward center for the client and show how it gets broken. I draw the reptilian brain and show what's in there: fight, flight, freeze, sex, food. So I draw these and thought, this is so overactive in you. So this is what's ruling your life right now.
Yeah.
And it only screams, eat or you die, eat or you die. And they, yeah, that's what it said. And then you have the pancreas and plays havoc with the whole hormone system. And this is a roundabout,
Yeah. And
once you explain that to people, they catch on and say, yeah, I can see how it started. I just did the sugar on a woman today, and she said, yeah, this is exactly how it was.
Yeah.
She had the first symptoms when she was 5. And then you can see the progression, and here comes the anxiety, here comes the depression, and on it goes.
You just described basically how you would do a sugar assessment. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Well, yeah.
Okay. And so your book, Sugar Bomb in the Brain, is that you wanted to show a picture of that, and that would describe essentially what you just said right now?
Absolutely. The first part of the book is about the problem, where I describe this whole physical, psychological, social, and spiritual building of the consequences. One thing leads to another in your body, in your brain, in your hormone, in your, insulin, everything. And the second part is about the solution. What in the hell, what do you do about this?
Yeah. Did you want to show? Yeah, there we go.
Sure. I'm going to show you the cover. This is the cover.
Oh, yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
And you're on a second or third edition yourself, aren't you?
Well, this is a translation and update of the third edition, which is 9 years old now. So, it's a lot of update. That's why I interviewed.
It's in English. That's right.
Yeah, it's the first one. It's my Swedish book translated.
Yeah.
So that's what it is, and it's what it's going to be.
Okay. It sounds like you've developed the food addiction. I don't know if you've changed it so much, or your sugar addiction, but you've embellished it. You've made it much more of a complex phenomenon. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
What about you? How have you developed your...
I think, yeah, so it's very similar to yours, and it's probably because we're stumbling on the same thing, because I think real what we're talking about. When I had my aha moment about the neurochemical piece, I then became more aware, and Food Junkies, my book, which captured that, really focused on that angle. But then since then, so since 10 years ago, or a little more than that, I stumbled into the low carb and keto community. And because they were the only ones talking about food addiction, they weren't talking about it, but the solution was the same. And the relief and the results and all of that stuff was the same. The weight loss and obsession, freedom from obsession. But I don't think they realized they stumbled on the food addiction solution. Just get rid of the refined carbohydrates and sugar, which is, of course, what a keto diet starts with, or low carb. And so then I thought, well, they're stumbling on something, but they're using a different language and a different methodology. It's about hormonal, and it's not neurochemical, it's the insulin response and beyond. And so I thought there's a whole area that I need to learn about that. And so my development as I went from the neurochemical, which is similar to what you're saying, realized it's much more complicated. Now I'm embracing the metabolic piece. And now I'm at the point, like now in 2025, where I'm actually starting to think that addiction, sugar addiction, refined carbohydrate addiction is just part of that metabolic syndrome. That is the case with, when you have metabolic syndrome, you have all sorts of things, not just diabetes and high blood pressure, but possibly dementia, depression. And I think
exactly, yeah.
And so
exactly what I'm doing, That's why I love working with Nutrition Network, because it covers that whole spectrum with all those consequences.
Yeah. So there's clearly our concept of food addiction is developing, and
absolutely, yeah.
So
it's very exciting. It's very exciting. So did I hear right that you're going to update your book?
Yes, I'm going to. Yeah,
I love it.
And so I'm going to try to add some of that. But it's, with the update, you can only have so many words. I want to double the size, and I can't do that.
Oh, ask me about it.
Yeah.
That's my worst struggle right now, is what shall I take away of the old and what shall I add?
I know, because it's all necessary. So anyway, we're running out of time. Where do you see addiction moving to? That you have been instrumental, as I have been in my part of the world, in moving it forward. We've got now training. You've got your training program. There's Esther's program. There's books that are being published. Where is it going from here? What do you think?
You and I have talked about this, and our dream is to train every doctor and nurse in the whole world in this topic, because this is the client they meet most is this, no doubt. So we need to get the word out to the medical community, because that's where people go for help with minor problems, big symptoms, big problems. So that is the important thing, to explain this in a way, because people are still afraid of the word addiction, still think it is, look down upon them. I don't remember the word right now, but look down upon them and think it has to do with character, and that you can't trust these people. They don't do what you say, because they don't understand the complexity of the brain and the body, and how this is all, getting so destroyed. And the brain damage that, causes foggy brain and denial and all that. So we need to connect the dots. We need to get into every discipline. And I remember when I started with the low carb community too, diet doctor, they laughed at me and said, there is no such thing as sugar addiction or food addiction. And I called Andreas himself. I remember he was in Skåne and interviewed on TV, and I said, you're dead wrong. Because he said, if it is an addiction, it's a milder addiction.
Yeah, that's what they said.
I didn't scream. Yeah. I didn't scream at him, but I said, you're dead wrong. It's the worst addiction of all, and it's the toughest addiction of all. And I'm even more convinced of that today.
Okay.
So that was 2005. And that's when I started finding freedom from my craving and food when I went to low carb. But in the beginning, I was overeating whipped cream and raspberry and nuts and seeds. And I realized that that had to go. And that I got nuts was my last bastion, 2016.
So, I was going to ask you, so your plan now, you are basically, you're keto, right? You're not even low carb.
Yes, I'm totally keto. And sometimes I'm carnivore. I think that's a good reset.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So in terms of where I see the future going, things like your program and Esther's program, like we're training the younger ones to carry on the message. And I think that just in this last year, the amount of publications that are coming out about food addiction or sugar addiction or just this whole concept, like that was unheard of even 3 or 4 years ago. Now, I think we're in a renaissance of recognizing food addiction. So maybe even the ICD and the DSM-4 will finally acknowledge. To date, not yet, but there's so much research and so much talk that I think that's the future, is that it will become professionalized. We just have to hope that will happen. And it's going to be up to the younger people to do that. Do you have any last words to say before my last question?
No, nothing. Just, only thing is that get knowledge. Please get knowledge. Learn what this is all about. You're never going to regret that. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So I think our favorite last question. What role has your doggy? Because you have a little dog. I have a little dog. Esther has a little dog. We're getting people, like, it's becoming a thing. Chrissy in Ontario, she just got a little dog. So what is your role if your dog played in your recovery? And if you show a picture, or is he sitting right beside you? I know that.
Let me just quickly get her.
And while Bitten is doing that, people can meet my Maddie. There's Maddie, my little doggy. She's going to get her dog. There he is. Wow.
Well, I gotta share the other ones I had, just so you see the difference. Look at this.
Oh, wow.
First dog, wolf hybrid, and then 2 border terriers. And now I have this 4-pound Chihuahua. She's the most difficult of them all.
Uh-huh.
But she's adorable. She's absolutely adorable. To me, I've always loved dogs. And I think one of the things that I love, in my line of work, I talk, I lecture, I listen to people that have terrible stories. I talk to them, I explain, I share. So what this is, it's wordless communication. And I love that. The look in her eyes when she talks to me without words, I know exactly what she's saying. And I don't have to explain to her. She knows what I mean. And I think that's a magic thing with dogs. Could be with all animals, but, I know dogs. She's very, very tricky, so I have to figure her out. She's not an easy roommate. She has her own will. She's very intelligent, but she's a blast. She's a lot of fun. And, of course, I love cuddling her and, the oxytocin. And joy and, all kind of ideas she has. That's what I love. I can't control her or rule her. I love that.
That's
I can domesticate her by teaching her things, but she's her own person.
Well,
so what about you?
Yeah, so I always wanted a dog when I was a child, and it just never happened that I had one. And then when I got one in my early teenage years, I didn't know how to treat a dog. So I just said, I'm never going to have a dog because I can't be a good dog owner. But then in my recovery, I got a dog. And because I love dogs, I love them. And I just always wanted a dog. But then I realized that how did it help me? It made me a nice person, because when I went outside, I didn't get out of my way. I'm walking. I would have my dog and people would stop and ask me questions. Oh, what kind of dog is that? How long have you had her? How old is she?
Social, very social. Yeah.
I was forced to talk to people, and I realized, you know what? I actually like talking to people, because I was one of those people, just tell me that, forget all the small talk. I got the value of just casual conversation. And then I just realized over time, I've just become a nicer person thanks to my dog, or my 2 dogs that I've had. So that's it.
And I love all the community I have with other dog lovers.
Yes.
We can talk dogs for hours,
We could.
And even dog poop and how did she eat. And I think it's hysterical funny, that we are so... My sister has a small dog too, and we always check, did he poop? Her dog. Was it okay?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hysterical funny. Right. So we laugh.
Yeah. So
it's
for people with food addiction, if you want to have that final thing to just make your...
But I have to share one crazy... I read Kathleen Desmaisons' book.
Yes.
Potatoes, Not Prozac.
Yeah.
And she wrote in the book, if you look for it, you see that food addicts love notebooks and colored pens. To buy new notebooks to write in and colored pens, and they love dogs. So through the years when I've lectured, I used to ask the audience, how many love colored pens? And they go, how many like to buy new, good, nice notebooks? Woohoo! How many love dogs? Woohoo! And I said, all of you are food addicts. And they started laughing like crazy. I said, yeah, you're right. And some say, no, I'm not. Okay.
I think that is a great way to end our podcast today. Thank you, Bitten, so much for sharing your experience.
Thank you. Thank you, Vera. Good luck with updating your book. I really look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us this week on Food Junkies Recovery from Food Addiction. Make sure to join our Facebook group, Sugar Free for Life Support Group, I'm Sweet Enough. Molly and Clarissa are food addiction professionals who offer one-to-one counseling and group coaching through Sweet Sobriety. Please subscribe to our show so you never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in today's episode, we'd appreciate you leaving us a review on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps grow our show and allows us to reach others who need to hear this message of recovery. Don't forget to pick up a copy of Dr. Tarman's book, Food Junkies. And as Vera always says, the power is ours.